This is the ERLC podcast, a production of the Edmonton Regional Learning Consortium. I am your host, Shane Lawrence. The ERLC is proud to partner with the Centre for Literacy to bring Dr. Stephen Feifer to host 2 days of professional learning on December 5th and 6th. The first is the Neuropsychology of Reading and Written Language Disorders, and the next is the Neuropsychology of Mathematics. You can register for both of these sessions at www.erlc.ca. And here to give us a bit more information about these sessions is the presenter himself, Stephen Feifer. Stephen, thank you so much just for your time and for joining us today.
My pleasure to be here, Shane. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's just start with the basics here. Can you tell me a little bit about sort of who you are, sort of what your position is in the education world?
Sure. Well, I am a licensed psychologist here in the United States, just outside of Washington, D.C., a town called Frederick, Maryland. Mm-hmm. My background's a little different. I'm trained as both a school psychologist, so I've spent more than 20 years in the schools, but also trained in neuropsychology, which I think traditionally is thought of, hey, you're in a lab, you're doing research, that kind of thing. And perhaps that's a part of it. But I've really spent my entire career trying to bridge what's going on in the neurosciences and with neuropsychology and how the brain learns information and make it more palatable, because I truly feel that this is an important way to help our educators understand learning better and to better inform interventions. I've always referred to myself as a bridge, someone who tries to take neuropsychology and make it more accessible for education. Mm-hmm. So these days I'm not in the schools. I still have a private practice. I still test kids, but I find myself on the road, on the speaking circuit quite a bit, and doing lots of professional development sessions for educators on a variety of topics.
Right. Okay. And so obviously the neuropsychology is a big thing. So for teachers, what is the benefit of understanding neuropsychology? Like, how is that going to alter, say, my practice?
Sure. So certainly if I'm a teacher, the last thing that I need to know is a bunch of dry old brain terms. I don't think that's going to help me a whole lot.
Yeah.
But what I found in the schools is there is a tendency when we have struggling learners, and let's just take reading for an example, because that's pretty popular and a pretty common issue for kids. They struggle learning to read. Mm-hmm. There's a tendency that we come up with a really good strategy, a good program, a good intervention, and we apply it to everybody. And then we start wondering, well, why does it work for Billy and not Susie over here? And what neuropsychology teaches us is that all brains are different, and that kids learn a little bit different, and that if you have an issue with reading, in fact, one of the things I talk about is there's different kinds of reading disorders. So if we can understand where the breakdown is in your reading, then we can get a lot more direct and specific with our interventions rather than just kind of do a trial and error approach with kids. So by taking this science side of learning, I think we can better help kids by being more specific in the interventions that we choose.
Right. So maybe can you give me like an example? Like, let's flesh this out a little bit. You're talking about reading. So what kind of problems might we encounter, or might we be missing?
Sure. So let's take an example of a third grader, someone in grade 3 who's really struggling with reading. There can be I always talk about 4 different kinds of reading disorders. Some people might see more than that. But the thing is, there's more than one. Because if you only believe, well, the reason they're struggling, there's only one kind of reading problem kids can have, then you get very monolithic in the interventions you choose. That student might struggle in 3rd grade because they cannot decode the words. They cannot mechanically crash through and accurately pronounce a word. So they would probably need more of a decoding intervention. Other students can sound out words perfectly, like cat, they'll sound it out. Yeah. But they're very, very slow, very, very disfluent. they need an intervention that's going to pick up the pace, more of a fluency-based intervention.
Mhm.
Other students struggle with both accuracy and fluency, so they need more of a balanced literacy approach. Others read just fine, but they can't answer the 10 questions, social studies questions in the back of the chapter. Their issue might be more related to ADHD, anxiety, but bottom line is they struggle with the comprehension side of reading. So that would be an example of trying to really dig down to what type of reading issue you have so it better directs us to how we're going to intervene.
Right. So at this kind, when we're talking about these kind of interventions, then I mean, where does the neuroscience aspect come in? Or are we just saying, because we know about neuroscience, we can say that there's different kinds of reading disabilities?
Yeah, so a lot of my talks, what I do is I start out in the brain but end up in your classroom.
Ah,
So what we see behaviorally, yeah, Billy struggles. He struggles to pronounce words. Sam is so slow. How can we pick up their pace? What I try to do is say, here in our brain, we're going to look at a few different pathways that underscore reading. For me to point to one area and say, you see the angular gyrus? Yeah, that angular gyrus, that's where reading is. That is really a misrepresentation of the science.
mhm.
Reading is a very complicated academic skill. There's multiple pathways and structures that contribute. One of the things that we can show is by breaking it down that way, is that when we can see the structures that are really strong, and then here's some that might be weak, and that's why you're seeing this in the classroom, it allows us to use strengths to help mitigate the weaknesses when we break it down that way. So we start out in the brain, but we end up in your classroom.
I like that. I like that. Start in the brain, end in the classroom. So ultimately, what we're aiming at is better practice for teachers.
Better practice for teachers to allow them to better meet the needs of students. And what I've found, Shane, over the years is most students, at least that I work with, and maybe many years ago, a typical referral would be Billy in third grade who has a reading issue, and we need to work on that. But the reality is the typical referral is Billy's in third grade, has a reading issue, but you know what? There's a lot of anxiety going on, and he doesn't focus very well, and his home life is a disaster. And you know
Mhm.
what? There might be some stress and trauma going on too. So it gets kind of complicated. And this
Right.
helps us sort of unpack what's going on and how to best focus our interventions.
Right. Right. What do you find is, I mean, if you have a student like that, who's maybe got like just coming in with just a pile of baggage, and I know I've got kids like that in my own room. I mean, how is it enough just to say, okay, we're going to try and help you with your decoding problem, or is there other needs that need to be met before that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and we can speculate, but that's the student that we need to do gather data, and the way, at least I feel we should gather data, is through assessments. Now, part of the data is, well, I tried this reading intervention and he didn't respond. Well, that's important to know. That's good stuff to know what didn't work.
Mhm.
I think our job, and sometimes, and I talk to other psychologists about this, we need to stop focusing on disabilities so much and
Mhm.
test for abilities, because all students have strengths and weaknesses. So when we do an evaluation, let's not just zero in on what Billy cannot do. Let's also find out the really good things he can do as well. And we're going to use strengths to help us mitigate the weaknesses. So to unpack these complicated kids, oftentimes we have to do a more formal assessment.
And what does that look like? I mean, are we talking about like the WISC and BASC and all those acronyms that I don't understand?
Yes. Yeah, all those four-letter acronyms, sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this is, I guess, where I come into play, because one of the things that I'm certainly going to be discussing in my workshops,
Mhm.
although I don't want it to be the main focus, is I've developed a series of diagnostic achievement tests for educators to use. So there's plenty of reading tests out there. Oh my goodness, take your pick, the Woodcock-Johnson, the why, why
Yeah.
does the world need another reading test? Well, those are traditional reading tests whose job is to come up with a single numeric value and say your reading is a 90 or a 70 or an 80. A diagnostic reading test, and the first one we'll talk about is the FAR, is a test that says not where are you reading, but why are you reading there and what can we do about it? So neurocognitive processing is built into the test. Working memory, phonology, morphology, orthography, executive functioning, language is built into the test. So when we know you struggle on a certain area of the test, because it's built in that way, oh, I know why. Poor orthography. Orthography is our ability to make a visual spatial representation of the printed word form in the mind's eye.
Mm-hmm.
Really need to be able to do that, to not only read words, to recognize words that you can't decode. And unfortunately, 25% of the words in the English language, you just can't decode. Good luck decoding yacht. Whose bright idea was it to put a C in a yacht? I mean, that's not fair. So the only way I know to pronounce it and to recognize that word, I had to have seen it before. I had to have had familiarity. Certain words, I need orthography. I need to draw upon that image of what I've seen before.
Right.
We build all that in the test so that we can better pinpoint where the breakdown is. And most importantly, it's linked to specific interventions. So it's not just the test, but that data will link to specific interventions, whether reading programs, strategies, all those kinds of things. And that's, that gets, I guess, a little complicated, but these kids are getting a little complicated.
Well, it seems to me also like, sometimes with more wisdom comes more sorrow, and that, the more you know about the neuroscience, the more it's like, oh, well, now we can test for this stuff. So we better get on that.
I love that phrase, the more wisdom. I'll have to remember that for my next workshop. But it's absolutely a lot of truth in that. And at the end of the day, I don't want people to leave my workshop thinking, wow, I learned some new lingo here with respect to brain terms. I know what the supramarginal gyrus is. I don't want people to walk away with that.
Yeah.
I want them to walk away with, I got a really good idea for Tommy, and I'm going to use it tomorrow, because what he said about how we deal with students who struggle with comprehension, and he just gave me 5 ways to help with reading comprehension. I can't wait to use that tomorrow for Tommy. That's what we want folks to get out of this.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. Now, can we switch gears? Because this is all about the reading, and the other really, complex task that is often on our students is the math side of things. So, yeah. I mean, you've got, we talk about like math anxiety and that sort of thing. So how do we approach that from the neurological standpoint?
What is it about math that just brings the angst out in all of us? There is something immensely intimidating about math, and it's a big component of our talk is, as you alluded to so accurately, the anxiety piece. What oftentimes we think is a math issue, a math learning disability, it's not a math problem. It's a confidence, anxiety, I convince myself I can't do this type of problem. A lot of times it stems from poor conceptual understanding and that I can't visualize math. And then when we cannot visualize magnitudes and amounts, math suddenly gets reduced to a bunch of weird symbols that go together out of context, and I have no idea what they mean or what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then the students, and maybe you've seen this with your students, they start memorizing the script because all they want to do is get an answer from the script, but they have no idea of the conceptual understanding underneath that script. Mm-hmm. And that's going to jump up and bite you, oftentimes on your tests, because I really don't understand math. I'm just memorizing my way through it. Yeah. And now I'm in a test-taking situation. And you know what? Some of these questions were not the same ones, Shane, you gave me on my homework. That's not fair. They're not the exact same ones. Now you've given it, and then I start to panic. And when I start to panic, what that does to the brain with respect to anxiety, it produces cortisol in the brain. Mm-hmm. Cortisol hinders our working memory. And that's an ugly cycle to be in. And then all of a sudden, my goodness, I'm so nervous. I'm so unsettled. I can't even remember how to spell my first name, let
Mm.
alone of content. And I panic and I don't do well on tests. And
Just
that
for
anxiety.
clarification, what is working memory?
So working memory, let's take it with respect to math,
Yeah.
is my ability to perform some mental gymnastics with numbers.
Okay.
So if you were to tell me, if I were to say, Shane, repeat back the following numbers, 6543,
6543. I win.
there you go. You win. So that's more immediate memory. I didn't ask you to do anything except repeat them back in the same order I say it. But if I said, Shane, I want you to repeat back the following numbers, 6543, but in reverse order.
Right.
How would you do that?
So I have to
Oh,
see the numbers in my mind, and then okay, a 3, 4, 5, 6.
then I'm going to guess you probably kind of visualize them a little bit, and then
Mm-hmm.
in your head, kind of rearrange them or perform some kind of mental endeavor. Or that's
Yeah.
the working memory part. And you can imagine as math gets a little more complicated, a lot of times we need to kind of crunch some numbers in our head. It's pretty important.
Mm-hmm. And so you're saying like with the cortisol, kind of the stress that comes in with all that, then it actually affects that. And then you can't manipulate anything anymore.
It's exactly what I'm saying. That if you were very, very nervous, very anxious. Perhaps you come from a traumatic background. One
Mm-hmm.
of the things that we know is that poverty is a huge source of stress. But over time, that produces cortisol in the brain. And if you might be able to tell me 6543, but if I
Mm-hmm.
said do it in reverse order, that's when it becomes really difficult.
Right. So then we've got students like that in our room. What do we do? What are some strategies that we can actually do to help alleviate that stress, or just help or at least even stop it from happening altogether?
Good. Two really good questions packed in. Good teachers that I am so impressed with do this not in the middle of October or November, but on the very first day of school. I see this, and I'm so impressed. They create a classroom climate and culture that's positive, that says we are a learning community, that we are going to be risk takers and we are going to encourage each other. And this is a safe environment. We establish that classroom climate from the get-go. That's going to help with relaxation. That's going to help maximize working memory. Now, if you have a student and you have that class and, hey, it's a nice class, it's a great learning community, but I'm telling you, this kid struggles with working memory. The easiest way for an instructor to pick that out is that's the student counting on their fingers or their toes. They're
Mm-hmm.
screaming at you. I can't see it in my head. I need something out here. So as an instructor, we need to break out the number lines, the dice, the dominoes, the unifix cubes, the
Mm-hmm.
manipulatives. We need to get something tangible that I can see and touch out here because I just can't see it in my head.
And then that way, so is this something that it would be like a long-term solution, or is this like you're freaking out? Here's some manipulatives. Let's try and reset here, or is it both? I mean, I don't know.
We hope we hope that the manipulatives will lead to a long-term solution. For example, let's take a math example. If
Mm-hmm.
I said, Shane, what's 9 times 4? You're like, oh, geez, I don't know. Is it 38, 35? I always forget my nines tables. It's
Yeah.
tough. One of the ways that we help kids to better visualize math is to convert it to a sense of 10ness. The brain loves 10ness. So how about we take 10 times 4? That's easy. That's 40. But I didn't
Mm-hmm.
say 10 times 4. I said 9. So we're going to subtract a 4 unit off the back end and go from 40 to 36. And one of the way to visualize a sense of 10ness, it's not to use a calculator. Calculator, I just push a button and get a magic answer. It's to use an abacus, a color-coded abacus. That
Hmm.
reinforces a sense of I can see that. I can represent that object in my head a lot better than this number 10 you put on the board. That's what we call a nice bypass strategy to start working on better working memory for math. We'll get to the symbols. We'll get to the symbols later. But how about we work with more that non-symbolic, for lack of a better term, and an abacus is a great way to create that.
I would never have guessed that. I
Well,
would.
we tend not to use an abacus in our classrooms. We tend to use more calculators, especially at the secondary level.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I've seen videos of, abacus experts like doing supposedly like calculus and stuff on abacus. I'm just like, that's amazing. So it seems like it's a foreign concept, but I like that idea. Is it sometimes just about getting kids just to kind of just mentally switch tracks? Are we talking about actually using different areas of their brain to kind of get around issues?
I think we are. Yeah. Yeah. So if I have a hard time visualizing math, I kind of default to my verbal skills, and that would be a different area of the brain. As an example of verbal skills, you can learn. You can learn your single-digit addition,
Mm-hmm.
single-digit subtraction, single-digit multiplication facts. You can learn those like it's a nursery rhyme. They have songs, that you can sing in your head to learn how to get the answers.
Mm-hmm.
You can learn those without having any quantitative knowledge whatsoever. I wouldn't recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
It'll help you get an answer on a test. But me memorizing the verbal phrase 3 times 5 is 15, I could memorize that as a phrase, as a nursery rhyme.
Mm-hmm.
And that I would be using the verbal centers of my brain. But for me to visualize 5 circles with 3 objects in each, that's what kind of more what I want. Now I'm understanding because I can apply a picture to it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using more the visual spatial centers of the brain. And down the road, that's going to help me a lot more than just memorizing a bunch of words, which you can do to get an answer.
Cool. So the neuropsychology, like you said, you'd start at the start of our chat, you were talking about understanding just how diverse our brains are and how different they work. So now this is kind of coming out the other end as, okay, so we need to provide students who struggle with ways of using like just different strategies so that they can overcome, these things that are getting in their way.
That's essentially the main point. And what we're going to say is that, some students with a learning disability, they have a roadblock. And for those students, I don't think we're going to remediate that. So we kind of have to go around the roadblock to, we bypass it, if I can use that phrase.
Yeah.
With others, and especially if they're younger, I'll go back to reading. Let's say I'm in 2nd or 3rd grade and I struggle to read because I can't decode and my phonics are poor. I think, we can still work on your phonics. Phonics is a young man's game. Now, I'm not going to teach a 16-year-old to read the same way I am a 6-year-old, but for younger students, I'm still working. I know you're weak on phonics, and I know that's your roadblock, but I think we can still work on this. So the younger students, there's a tendency to more want to go straight through. Let's remediate the issue. As they get a little bit older, sometimes we're thinking more bypass strategies.
Right. So okay, coming back around then to, reading and phonics. And then, so what are some of the strategies or the tools that you would recommend, for introducing and reinforcing vocab and that sort of thing, the basics of reading?
Well, to introduce vocabulary, I've got a very, very innovative strategy. I hope you're ready for this one. Here we go. You need to read 20 minutes per day after school. That's my strategy.
Cool. Mind-blowing.
Who would have thought? Quick data. If you were to read 20 minutes per day after school, and Shane, you read whatever you want. You want to read about hunting or fishing or wrestling. Let's make sure it's on an appropriate instructional level. But content-wise, you pick whatever you want. If you read 20 minutes per day after school, on average, I'm not saying you're going to know this, but on average, you will have been exposed to nearly 2 million words throughout a year. You want to be better in reading. It starts with text familiarity, and that starts with practicing the skill. And I've got a really cool graph and visual. I show folks that I want every parent to see this graph, that we need. This is no different than if you want to be better in tennis or baseball or whatever that skill is, you have to practice. 20 minutes a day is going to be a minimum after school.
brilliant. I mean, I used to teach English for many, many years in my teaching career. And that was it always broke my heart, because kids are like, how can I learn to write better? I'm like, well, read more. Well, it's how to learn to read better. Well, read more. It's like I feel like such a heel. It's like I've got 7 years of post-secondary, and here I am just telling kids, like, my big secret, read. Because you're right, the data's in, right?
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. It will not only help your reading, by that kind of text exposure, it will spill over, as you know, and you taught this, in your writing, your vocabulary development, the way you phrase things, the way you organize your thoughts, because you have read how others do that, and it no doubt will sink in. A lot of parents say, we don't have time to read 20 minutes a day. What are you talking about? My life is busy. We've got too much Netflix to watch on TV. How can we read 20 minutes a day? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Fine. What's your favorite show? Okay, great. Here's what I want you to just try it for 15, 20 minutes. Turn the sound down and put closed caption up. See if we can hang in there for 20 minutes. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
We can find a way.
Absolutely. Well, it sounds like you're going to be bringing some really cool stuff with your sessions next month. So, Stephen, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate this.
Oh, it was a lot of fun, Shane. I'm really looking forward to coming to Edmonton and working with the talented educators in your region. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. If anyone wants to, get a head start, maybe look you up online, where can they go?
Yeah, so I've written a few books that I'll be bringing with me, both on the neuropsychology of reading, writing, and math disorders. Very similar to the presentation, starts out in the brain, but it's going to wind up with a lot of really good practical recommendations. Had a lot of help on that part of it, so I'm real proud of how it came out. You might want to check us out at www.school Neuropsych Press, NEUROPSYCH. School Neuropsych Press, that's all one word, www.schoolneuropsychpress.com. That's where all of our materials are at.
Beautiful. Right on. Well, looking forward to seeing you in Edmonton here, Stephen, and thanks again.
Okay, take care, Shane. Thank you again.
All right, you too. And thank you again to Stephen Feifer for sharing this bit of information about his upcoming sessions. That's the Neuropsychology of Reading and Written Language Disorders on December 5th and the Neuropsychology of Mathematics on December 6th, both of which you can register for at www.erlc.ca. All right, that does it for this time out. So thank you so much again for listening, and we'll see you next time on the ERLC show.